Are you a Christmas light guy or are you a pest control guy? So they spend 9, 10 months, whatever it is, doing pest control services, and then you go into Christmas lights and the skill set that they're adding does nothing to make them better at what they do for the rest of the year, right? So every one of these jobs is a complete custom install. Ladders that are icing up. They require roof walking, and usually it's pitched. A lot of one-off labor is what you're dealing with. One of the key rules of scale is that you want to avoid building a house of cards. Are you a Christmas light guy or are you a pest control guy? I mean, do you solve tough, complex, scientific problems with amazing science-based solutions? Or do you do construction projects and sling, nails around and glue and a bunch of other stuff or whatever? Well, man, this time of year, guys get a little bit confused, particularly if you're in like a res-com kind of branch where you're doing, part residential, part commercial, or you're doing a lot of residential. It can be really enticing to go after Christmas lights this time of year. I wanted to do a podcast that was a little bit different, and I might crush some sacred cows here a little bit, right? But I don't know if you know, but Christmas lights are one of the things that may be slowly killing your business and damaging your brand over the long term. It looks like a way to get some quick money, some quick, easy winter money. Maybe things are slowing down. Maybe you're used to going after bugs and things are swarming and that kind of thing. And so you're like, man, you know what? Let's go for some quick revenue. All these Christmas light companies have spent a bunch of money on marketing, and they keep saying it's a good idea. I talked to a friend, and it seemed like, he's doing okay in Christmas lights. Let me go and throw that in. But here's what oftentimes happens. Guys will look up and they'll realize, man, the brand is confused now. The brand to the customer is confused. The team is unfocused because they're running around all over the place, kind of chasing their tail, doing things that are totally not related. Revenue ends up being seasonal because, well, now when we don't have Christmas lights, we got to switch back over modes and go do something else. Margins are shrinking because it's not high margin work. And then the customer that used to trust you for their pest control all of a sudden starts thinking of you as the Christmas light guys, right? So I'm going to kind of rip the cover off this whole thing. I'm not going to shame anybody, of course, who's already doing like Christmas lights and stuff like that. But I think that you'll recognize some of these core problems in your business. And really what I want to try and do is save companies from making a decision that kind of feels smart in the moment, but costs them hundreds of thousands of dollars over time. One of the primary reasons why it does this is because it violates one of the fundamental rules or some of the fundamental rules of scale, which I'll get into and talk about it. But first, let me talk about why lights feel smart but aren't. And here's kind of the common pitch that you might hear. It might be something like, you've already got ladders there. It keeps your techs busy, your service specialists busy during the slow season. It's easy money. Right, I've got these customers that are here and they have houses and therefore they're, adding this service that does something in the house. Maybe this looks like an easy add-on. It's just for a couple of months. These are some things that you might hear. And here's some of the industry numbers that are advertised here. They'll say stuff like it's 25% to 45% profit that's advertised. Again, these light companies are spending a bunch of money on marketing to try and get you guys into doing this. They might say stuff like it's a 20% or 35% net income that you get or profit if priced aggressively with few callbacks. The average job, is going to pay low side, maybe a couple $100, and I don't know what market that is. Usually it's going to be a little bit more than that, to $1,000. If you're in nice neighborhoods in the Tulsa area, which, this could be higher than that depending on where you're at. Usually the starting price is around $1,200 in a nice neighborhood. Some seasonal profit operators will even brag about $10,000, $16,000 jobs. And then some aim for 60% margin, but only with elite systems and perfect pricing. So all of this sounds really great until you understand how scaling actually works. So let me talk about the mechanics of scale here really quickly and break this down. And this is so important. I love training pest control companies on this because there can be a breakdown in understanding the mechanics of scale. At a smaller company, you're kind of trying to figure that out, right? If you're, and then especially too, man, you cross over and let's say you're doing somewhere between 1 and 5 million in revenue. right? You got there by hustling. You got there by going out and getting more customers, kind of growing that way. Now you're working on trying to figure out systems that are duplicatable, and you're running into things like, I'm having trouble training my techs. I'm having trouble bringing techs in, training them fast enough and getting them, and then keeping them, and then there's turnover, and then there's all this other stuff that happens or whatever, right? Fundamental rules of scale. And then when I'm dealing with larger companies at the branch level, because those larger companies break down into branch level, a lot of times not understanding the mechanics of scale can then cause managers to do some things that are a little bit wonky, or district managers, directors to do things that are a little bit wonky that don't quite line up with the rules of scale. But for the most part, what you'll find is the larger companies avoid these things like this. It's usually those smaller pest control companies that are kind of getting into, getting distracted by some of this stuff, like some of this Christmas light stuff. Okay, so let me give you guys some scaling rules. First of all, doing more work under the principle of scale should get easier, not harder. It should get easier over time. Scalable means more jobs with less stress that are done more efficiently. I'll say that again. Scalable means doing more work with less stress, and it's being done more efficiently. That's one of the fundamental rules of scale. What's not scalable are more jobs that require more hours, that require more labor, that offer more chaos and cost more. That is not scalable. One of the key rules of scale is that you want to avoid building a house of cards. What can happen when you're building a business is it can feel like you're taking one step forward and then two steps back. I don't know if any of you guys have ever had this happen before, but it's like you made some progress in business. Man, you hit this revenue peak. Man, this is the best year ever, blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden, the next year, things kind of fell apart a little bit, right? It was like, man, how come we slid backwards? Or why are all of my systems breaking? Why does it feel like I'm only putting out fires all the time? Well, it's because that fundamental rule of scale, where it's like these systems are being refined and being built as we go so that it doesn't fall backwards as you're getting larger, those things are not in place, so things move backwards. And so you want to make sure that you don't violate the fundamental rules of scale. Here's another scaling rule. One customer should always lead to a lot more future revenue. That's things like, of course, recurring contracts, route density for you guys, your monthly billing, of course, commercial accounts, compounding revenue, and then revenue stacking. That's really what you're looking for as you're fundamentally building the business. Here's another rule inside scale. The team should get better by doing the same thing repeatedly. This is the reason why, as businesses get bigger, this is the reason why when you look at some of your really big neighbors, those of you guys who are in the smaller pest control side and are looking at some of these large companies, it's the reason why companies start to break out into divisions. Because what it does is it allows this specialized group of people to really, really zoom in, hone in, and focus on something that they get really, really good at. So that division, this thing becomes their zone of genius instead of saying, hey, we're just going to give this out to everybody, right? So repetition produces speed, speed produces efficiency, efficiency produces higher margins, and higher margins continue to fuel growth. So you have to remember, especially if you're going fast, remember, it's not a lack of revenue that kills business. It's actually cash flow that kills a business, which is so frustrating that a business can be generating a ton of cash, but how that cash flows in can dictate whether or not that business actually stays alive or not. Cash, remember, is oxygen for your business, right? And so if you've got greater margins, so you have more business coming in, but if the margins are shrinking, you're actually eliminating oxygen and you're choking yourself to death. Where you've got to be is more businesses coming in that is paying you higher margin. As it does that, you get more oxygen, which then fuels more growth. Does that make sense? I hope it does. I hope that really translates for you. Here's another rule inside of scale. I said this a second ago, but staying inside your zone of genius. Doing one type of work will equate to mastery over time. Doing random side services resets expertise to zero. Man, I remember companies that were running after like cleaning stuff during COVID, right? And some companies made a whole bunch of money, right? But look at it, like how many of those pest control companies are still doing cleaning services? Not very many of them, right? So it's this non-scalable service that maybe brought this influx of cash in the short term, right? Might have been a cash cow in the short term, but didn't actually produce anything over the long term. And you want to avoid that kind of stuff. It's not just that slow and steady wins the race. Slow and steady becomes fast and rock solid, and that beats somebody that hops around all over the place all day, every single day, right? Here's another rule, and the last rule I'm going to give you inside this scaling thing. The brand stays simple and clear. Here's what customers should know. This is what these guys do. This is what my company does. What you want to do, and a part of being everywhere, which is that rule of 10x. Some of you guys that might be familiar with maybe Grant Cardone's 10x rule, right? And I'm not saying that, whatever you feel about Grant Cardone, it's whatever. He does have some great content. Whether you like him or don't, it doesn't matter. But this principle is true no matter who actually said the principle. And it's this 10x rule where it's like, man, if you are everywhere, then the customer can't help but see you, and they just have to be exposed to you enough, and eventually they are going to come your way, right? But here's what you don't want to do. You don't want to be 10x, like be everywhere, but then be everywhere to everything. Imagine if Apple, right? Imagine if Apple got into like selling ramen noodles or something else ridiculous, right? It's like, hold on, like you're diluting the brand. Like, are you guys the computer guys? Are you guys the ramen noodle guys? Are you guys the whatever the heck it is that they get into, right? So we got to remember, we are establishing trust with the customer so they keep coming back. So clarity produces trust. Trust produces pricing power, where you have control over your prices, right? Where you're not doing this thing where it's like, let's race to the bottom and then be in competition with everybody else to be the low price leader. You don't want to do that. And the only way that you can do that is if somebody trusts you. Think about an artisan, right? Maybe that crafts custom cabinets or custom furniture. The reason why it's like they make a table, right? And it's like, okay, you could go to, Walmart and buy a table for, I don't know what the prices are, $150 or something or whatever, right? You could go buy that. But then you see this table over here and they're charging $30,000 for this table. It's like, what is the difference between this table for $150 and this? Well, yeah, like there's the quality and the craftsmanship and all that stuff. But what it is this person has a proven record of crafting something that's incredible. A proven record of paying attention to the details, of saying the details matter more than anything else. And what it says is, I care about you. I cared about you so much to pay attention to the details. Well, when you do that, you can control the price. If the customer knows the difference between you and the other guy is that you're going to pay attention to the fine details and get those fine details right at a high level over and over and over again, that's repeatable. And then if there's anything that deviates from that, they can call you and you're going to fix that right away and take care of them. Guess what? They trust you. And who cares what the other guy charges? They're going to be like, yeah, but I trust this guy. So remember that pricing is established based on trust, and that price power then ends up producing long-term value. So it's clarity, trust, price power, and that equals long-term value. Those are the 5 fundamental rules, and hopefully this episode is just worth it for you, just for that. Forget about Christmas lights or anything else, right? Those are the rules, period. So when you're considering adding things or doing things, you should run it through that filter, right? Okay. Here is why Christmas lights now break every rule of scale. First of all, they get harder to do as it grows. Every one of these light installs are custom installation. You can't just go in there and do the same thing over and over again. One of the things that we've done with bird control, our focus in bird control, has been a repeatable system, right? We have fundamentally, if I could talk today, fundamentally reshaped bird control into something where you could do over and over and over and over again. What we noticed was that guys were doing these one-off jobs or whatever, right? And they're doing 1 or 2 or 5 bird jobs a year, and they couldn't even do more than that, even if they wanted to. I mean, the whole system would break at like 10 jobs or something. Because it wasn't scalable. Everything was very, very custom. So we were like, how can we make this whole thing freaking cookie cutter? It's a reason why some of your other pest control services scale so well. It's not because, I mean, yes, every job is a little bit different, but it's like there are only a handful of variables that change, right? When you control those variables that change, you can do things a lot faster. You can train people a lot faster on it. You get better results, right? So every one of these jobs is a complete custom install. They require roof walking, and usually it's pitched roofs. You'll get into stuff where you've got ladders that are icing up. A lot of one-off labor is what you're dealing with. And then every job requires the same high energy and the same amount of time. It doesn't get easier as it goes. Here's another rule that it breaks. There's no long-term value. Lights equal a $0 January in that category. Unless, you're in some weird town where they still like Christmas lights being hung up in January or whatever. Actually, tell me. Feel free to comment below or message me or something like that if you're in a town like that, because I want to come visit. It's like that's probably a town that just keeps Christmas all year in their heart. Like what Charles Dickens wrote about or whatever, right? That sounds like a great place to hang out. Like I want to come hang out there. Okay. But what it leads to is a $0 January. There's no compounding. There's no recurring billing. There's no expansion into other core services. There is no lifetime value. Those of you guys who have sold a pest control company know that there are a couple of categories that guys that are buying are going to look at. Lifetime value, how much over the lifetime is each one of these accounts worth, and CAC, or customer acquisition cost. How much does it cost to onboard a new customer, and then how much value does that customer produce over the life of that account? That's what they're looking for. There's no lifetime value with these type of accounts. And then every year starts again from scratch because there's no lifetime value. That's a problem. Here's another rule that it breaks. It dilutes the skill development. So what ends up happening is your service specialists or your techs end up having to learn brand new layouts. They've got to learn timers. They've got to learn load balancing on these circuits. They've got to learn roof anchoring. They've got to learn clip spacing. And these are all skills that do absolutely nothing to make them better at pest control. So they spend 9, 10 months, whatever it is, doing pest control services, and then you go into Christmas lights, and the skill set that they're adding does nothing to make them better at what they do for the rest of the year, right? It's a recipe for losing, right? And another rule that it makes, of course, is that it breaks is it divides that zone of genius. So they don't get better over time, right? And then one of the last rules here that it breaks is that it also confuses the brand. Again, I talked about this at the top of the episode, but it's like, are you pest experts or are you seasonal decorators? That's the question that comes into the customer's mind. One of the reasons why Avitrol is specifically associated with bird control is because we want people to, when they see a bird, we want them to think Avitrol across the board. This is the reason why when you look at a lot of our brand strategy, when you look at the stuff that you see, it's related to birds, like just in general, right? Because the 10X rule says, hey, I want you to think about this when you think about this. That's it. Across the board, in every audience, every category, that's really what I'm looking for, right? That's what the team is looking for, and that's really what you want. So brand confusion produces lower trust, which means lower prices, which means lower lifetime value over time. That's what you want to avoid, okay? Now, here are also some hard risks that nobody really talks about when you consider getting into something like this. First of all, these are stats. These are government stats that we were able to find. Somewhere between 14,900 and 18,400 decorating injuries happen per year. Per year. Half of those injuries come from falls, and 40 to 43% of those come from ladder falls. And that's exactly the type of work, of course, that's associated with these lighting installs. Then on top of it, you've got fire risk. So you've got 790 decoration fires per year in the U.S. And then a few hundred of those are Christmas tree fires. So if you're going to the interior, you're doing some of that and doing some decoration work there, which I know a lot fewer companies are doing that. But you expose a whole other avenue of risk. So there's the exterior fire. And then there's the interior fire risk there that caused millions in property damage. In fact, in Colorado, there was an installer recently hit with a $75,000 lawsuit because of a home fire that was caused. So multiple fires and suits have been connected to installations, especially cheaper installations, over time. In fact, recently as well, there was a 24-year-old worker that was electrocuted installing lights near a power line in California, which everything about that sucks, right? So pest control already carries enough risk. And then Christmas lights add a construction project level risk that doesn't produce any long-term reward, right? It doesn't make any sense when you start to do the math and you start to really add some stuff up, okay? Now, there is a better way. I don't want this whole podcast to be like, oh man, this is negative, like blah, 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 you're trashing it, but you're not giving us solutions. One of the things that we do internally, our staff does, is it's like, you're not allowed to bring up a problem unless you bring up a solution. That's what we bring to the table every single time, right? And so there is a solution. There are better ways to scale your business during what feels like the slow season because things aren't swarming. And so what I want to present to you is just bird control here really quickly as the option. That really is a smarter move. It actually checks the scale rules, and I'm going to actually show you how it does. First of all, bird control is particularly with bird baiting. It gets easier as you grow. It uses the same trucks. You're using the same PPE. You've got the same type of inspections. You're using similar verbiage, right? Bait stations, things like that. Same technician structure. The process gets faster with every job. And then margin increases as repetition happens, and that ends up building your skill over time. Here's the other thing that it does inside the rule of scale. It leads to more future revenue. So bird jobs often turn into general pest jobs, like rodent, mosquito, sanitation, like all sorts of different jobs end up coming from that. I can't tell you how many customers or how many pest control companies that we work with that say, hey, I actually got my foot in the door on the general pest and I ended up taking away the general pest from another company that didn't offer bird, this company didn't have general pest control and I was able to go ahead and sell them general pest control. It leads to multi-building contracts, annual monitoring, and it's a relationship building service. So instead of it being a one and done like lights and decorations might be, this is something that grows through all the months of the year. Okay. The other rule 3 that it helps is it sharpens core skills. Rule 3 of scale that it fits inside of is it sharpens core skills. So it strengthens your inspections, it strengthens your site evaluations, it strengthens your hazard assessment, it strengthens your route planning. Bird work ends up compounding your skills over time, whereas lights end up scattering skills. So what you want as you add services and as you do things are things that compound your skill over time, okay? The other rule of scale that it hits is it stays inside of your zone of genius. Remember, birds are pests, just like you're dealing with insects that are pests or rodents that are pests. And so baiting ends up being pest control. Everything ends up reinforcing identity with your customer. If I deal with a pest, then I call these guys. If I deal with decorations and Christmas stuff, then I call these guys, right? And the last thing it does is it clarifies your brand. Again, you're a professional, a pro. Pro guys do pro work, and pro guys stay inside their zone of genius. You solve serious pest problems. You're the expert all year long. You're not the expert 9 months out of the year or 10 months out of the year. You're the expert on pests all the time. Brand clarity ends up boosting your lifetime value. It ends up boosting your pricing power, your referrals, your trust, instead of sending mixed messaging and then weakening your identity. Okay. Now let's look at the economics here just really quickly. Let's compare. Lights, you're talking a 25 to 45% margin. You're talking 25 to 30% net. You might be talking as low as $200, $1,000, could be $1,200, somewhere in there for those jobs. It's seasonal only. Again, high labor, high risk, doesn't stack in anything, and resets to zero. Bird baiting, by comparison, you're talking at least a 60% profit margin. 60% minimum is where you should be at. I've got a lot of companies that we work with that are making 90% plus margin. The low ticket size is $5,000, and it goes up into the six figures, but the low ticket size is $5,000. Low overhead to do the work. There's a year-round need, there's recurring opportunities, and then it opens massive commercial doors. Again, you take care of one location, and then the next one, and the next one, and the next one. So it's like it opens the door for commercial accounts. You're ending up working with commercial account managers, managing that entire account, right? And then also selling those general pest services into there as well, too. Okay. So just to kind of sum all of this up here, if the service doesn't reinforce your identity, if it doesn't increase long-term revenue, and if it doesn't make your business easier, the bigger it gets, it's not a strategy, it's a distraction. It's not a strategy, it's a distraction. Okay? So, as you're looking at the whole Christmas light thing, and honestly, man, you really got to think about it too. If you're already in it, right, you're probably already seeing some of these problems. And a lot of times what it takes as a business owner is it takes the intestinal fortitude to look at things that aren't working and cut them off, right? It might be producing some, but what is it costing you? What's the opportunity cost, okay? You might bring in, let's say you're bringing in even an extra 6 figures spread out over a couple months every season. What if that's costing you $800,000 or $1 million in revenue that could be coming in right there instead, going after some of these other opportunities, right? So you got to take that into account. I highly recommend the book by Jim Collins, Good to Great. One of the marks of these good to great companies, several of them, was actually having the intestinal fortitude to look at the course that they had charted before, see what wasn't working, and even if it was their core business, there are companies that are inside that book that completely cut off core business and went into a whole different category, literally because that category was better, right? And so it does require us to take a look at the hard facts and say, man, what actually is working, what is not working, and then just having the courage enough to just cut that thing off, right? And then actually go after what truly works, okay? So bird baiting gives you customers for years, right? You're not looking for cash for a couple of months. You want things that are going to give you value for years. So run after that. Man, I really, really hope that I saved some businesses today, and maybe save some businesses that were maybe on the tipping point. Maybe you started and it wasn't going the right way or something like that. And it's like, hopefully this gives you, not that you need permission, but hopefully this gives you permission to go, man, this thing's a boat anchor. Let's cut it off. Let's go after things where we can acquire customers at a lower cost over time, and they produce lifetime value over time. And they do what we're trying to do, which is scale this amazing pest brand and communicate to customers that we are a science-backed professional organization that will take care of your pest problems every single time with a standard that you can trust.